Here's some great positive news, and I think more states should do this. Some states do have bills that reform eyewitness identification, but there are some specifics in this bill that I think are really wise and, kind of nuanced. So Indiana passes first eyewitness identification reform bill, tackling a leading cause of wrongful convictions. And they have the stats in here. We'll get to them. Let's see, backed by exoneree testimony and decades of research, Senate Bill 141 introduces key protections to ensure more reliable identifications and a stronger criminal legal system. So this month, Indiana took a pivotal step towards strengthening the integrity of its legal system, criminal system, when Governor Mike Braun signed Bill 141, the state's first eyewitness identification reform, into law. The legislation was championed by the Innocence Project and the Notre Dame Exoneration Justice Clinic. Eyewitness misidentification has been a leading cause of wrongful convictions across the United States. Do you guys remember when they had Quindarius Zachary testifying to whether or not he was pointing at photos that were on the table during an interview he did with detectives? So speaking of eyewitness identification, there was that was one of the funnier moments there in YSL 1. It has played a role in 70% of the more than 375 wrongful convictions overturned just by DNA evidence. In Indiana, 36% of wrongful convictions have involved mistaken eyewitness identification. This has resulted in a cumulative 245 years of unjust imprisonment for innocent individuals. And again, this is constrained to Indiana. These specific cases, 245 years, you can't put a price tag on that. So Senate Bill 141 introduces 3 critical reforms. There's a fourth that I think is really important too. Law enforcement must now inform witnesses that the accused may or may not be present in the lineup, and that they will continue their investigation whether or not an identification is made, reducing pressure to make a selection. Because think about it. You want to identify somebody, and you might think, they're showing me 6 people, one of them has to be the person, right? So there's only a 5 in 6 chance I might have it wrong. But even if I'm not sure, if I don't get it right, somebody dangerous could be out on the street, or they won't even look any further. So this type of reassurance, and also, it might not even be one of these 6 people. So if you don't actually know that it is in fact one of these 6 people, it might look like you're just lying. So think twice before you just try to point to somebody because you feel like you have to pick somebody. We've also got this, non-suspect fillers. So the other pictures that they fill up the page with, chosen for lineups, must resemble the witness's description, and the suspect should not noticeably stand out from the fillers. So don't just, if the witness has already described somebody to you, and you give them, like, let's say they say somebody, like, let's do like a standing lineup. Let's say the witness says the person was over 6 feet tall, and you do a lineup with a bunch of people that are really short and then one really tall guy. What's going to happen there? What's going to happen there? So this one, I feel like you don't even need to really spell out why it's important. It's just making it so the things that we barely notice in a fleeting moment where we might not have the most accurate image in our mind of who we saw committing a crime, we're not just going to make it a process of elimination guesstimate. The next one is witnesses' confidence levels at the time of identification must be recorded, providing context for the reliability of their testimony. So this is a bit more than just, you get an officer on the stand or an officer writing an affidavit and saying, we did the witness identification lineup and the victim identified Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so as the perpetrator. And that's all the context we get. Nope, now you have to record anything that the witness may have said describing their confidence level. So, I don't really know. Or can I look at that other page again? I think it's this guy. I mean, all of those little language, think. Can I look at that other one? I don't really know. Each one of those little phrases pokes away at the confidence level. And then they have this detail here that I think is also important. Additionally, Senate Bill 141 stipulates that if facial recognition technology is used to identify a suspect, law enforcement must corroborate this identification with additional evidence before proceeding with a lineup, ensuring that facial recognition alone does not serve as the sole basis for suspect identification. So I think they didn't bullet point it here, but I still there's issues with facial recognition technology. And, there's also a kind of, I would say, at the introduction of this technology, I think people can put more faith. Well, if software identifies something, that might be more reliable than a human in certain circumstances or certain use cases. If we need both, I think that's a bit better. I think that's a healthier approach. However, what does a law enforcement officer corroborating this identification? What's the additional evidence that they would need to corroborate? Could that just be somebody lives in that neighborhood? So circumstantially, it's possible that that person could have been present in a 5-block radius. Is that all it would take? So this is a little bit unspecified, but at least it's saying do something. They continue with the adoption of these reforms, Indiana is the latest state to standardize its identification procedures and consider model practices for conducting lineups, which are backed with over 4 decades of research and have broad support from scientists, law enforcement, and prosecutors. We have a quote here from Jimmy Gurule. That's the director of Exoneration Justice Clinic. He says, I am proud of the work done by the Notre Dame Exoneration Justice Clinic and our partners, as well as exonerees like Leon Benson, who relived his trauma and shared his story to prevent future miscarriages of justice. We look forward to the next legislative session when we still continue to advocate for policies and legislative reforms that prevent and address wrongful convictions. And then they go into Benson's story. So he testified at this hearing to help get this bill passed. He was wrongfully convicted for 1998 murder in Indianapolis. The prosecution's case primarily relied on an erroneous identification from a witness who observed the attacker from approximately 150 feet away in near darkness. So you remember in YSL and probably other trials you've watched, do you remember what was it like outside? Was it sunny? Was it daytime? Was it dark? And another unreliable identification from an individual with a history of mental illness and a personal grudge against Mr. Benson. No physical evidence linked him to the crime. Since his release and exoneration, Mr. Benson has been an outspoken advocate for criminal legal reform, emphasizing the dangers of eyewitness misidentification. I hope that, so this is Mr. Benson speaking, I hope that by being behind this bill, it would urge people who are in power to give people like me an opportunity to get in a position to get the job done. Mr. Benson testified in front of the committee. I think this encourages other exonerees to use their platform to push to make things better. So there we go. We get in some, let's see. Oh, so these were Indiana cases too. So William Barnhouse and Larry Mays, those were Indiana cases. They go on to give some context here that Mr. Barnhouse spent 25 years in prison for a 1992 sexual assault conviction based largely on a suggestive roadside identification. He was exonerated by DNA evidence in 2017. Mr. Mays was wrongfully convicted in 1982 after the witness identified him under hypnosis, a fact withheld from the jury. What the hell were they doing in 1982? He served 21 years before DNA testing cleared his name in 2001. Both cases exemplify the catastrophic consequences of flawed identification practices. While Senate Bill 141 marks significant progress, it does not include all recommended best practices by leading scientific and legal authorities. Notably, it omits the requirement of double-blind administration, where the lineup administrator also doesn't know who the accused is. So they can't, implicitly, accidentally, or intentionally steer or cue somebody. Are you sure you don't see it on that page? A question like that can steer somebody. So, they weren't using. Oh man, this is crazy. I'm shocked that this is not part of this bill. So currently, this bill does not include a requirement of double-blind administration. So that is not a requirement in Indiana right now for eyewitness identification procedures. That's a little crazy. Notably, it omits the requirement of double-blind administration where the lineup administrator also doesn't know who the accused is to prevent them from unintentionally influencing witnesses. The Innocence Project will continue to advocate for the adoption of double-blind lineups in the future, as well as support implementation as a next step. The organization will collaborate with public defenders and police on a series of training sessions on the new law, emphasizing the importance of unbiased procedures. And if you want to be malicious, you could just say you don't know you don't know something and just do it for your buddy, right? Oh, I'll stand in for that double blind thing. I got you, bro. I don't know, like maybe there's like some type of third party, or I mean, couldn't software help with this? I don't know. I feel like there's a solution here where it's not that difficult to come up with some type of reconciliation that's better than what exists right now, right? Better is sometimes enough. It might not be the most perfect thing ever, and we might have to make changes and continue to improve. But can we do something a little better right now? But they say Indiana took a positive first step towards addressing erroneous eyewitness identifications with this passage. Said Innocence Project state policy advocate Winnie Yee, not to be confused with Wooney Lee. We look forward to continuing to collaborate with policymakers and law enforcement stakeholders on future reforms and trainings. Yes, please do the trainings as well, because I don't know about the new procedures. To guarantee that all best practices are one day implemented and Indiana maintains the highest standards of criminal justice. Make it a competition. Make these states compete to have the highest integrity in their criminal justice system. Make it a competition, and let's see. Let's see if people get motivated. The hypnosis for always, forever, for life says, hypnosis? What the hell? Mary W., that's horrible. Yeah, when I was reading that, I mean, okay.